Welcome to this journey into one of the most chilling events ever recorded in the Appalachian Mountains. Before we begin, I want you to leave a comment telling me where you're watching from and the exact time you heard this story. We're curious which hours carry the heaviest whispers of Pine Creek. It all began in the autumn of 1923, when the town seemed ordinary, quiet, and unsuspecting. But that calm was a mask. Beneath it, events were unfolding that would haunt this valley forever. Acts of obsession, fear, and something no one could fully explain. Tonight, you'll witness what happened and decide for yourself whether the woods still remember. They told the townsfolk never to speak of what happened in Pine Creek. But some nights, the woods themselves whisper the truth. Children who grew up here remember hearing stories in hushed tones, stories meant only for those who dared walk past the creek after sunset. Old men would shake their heads when asked, and mothers would pull their children close, telling them to forget what they heard in the dark. What could drive a peaceful Appalachian town to such horror? How could a place so familiar, with gentle hills and winding streams, become the site of a tragedy that still lingers almost a century later? Tonight, we walk the same paths, peer into the same homes, and trace every step of the events that no one dared write down. Until now. Pine Creek, in 1923, was an unremarkable town by most standards. Wooden houses lined the single main road, chimneys puffing smoke from early autumn fires. Children ran barefoot along dirt paths, their laughter carried in the wind, mingling with the occasional clop of a horse's hooves. The mountains rose around the town like a protective wall, yet in their shadows secrets festered. The air smelled of wet earth, mixed with the faint, sharp tang of wood smoke and falling leaves. A river ran quietly along the outskirts, its waters reflecting the pale moonlight. At night, the creek seemed alive in ways no one spoke of, its surface glinting as if holding back stories. In these days, life was simple, measured by chores, school bells, and community gatherings. Neighbors knew each other's routines. But beneath the surface, the town held a tension few understood. Small things, the unusual absence of a child's voice, the nervous glance of a teacher, a dog that refused to enter the woods, were ignored or dismissed. Leaves crunch underfoot. The wind whistles through the treetops. A distant dog baying. A faint, almost imperceptible splash in the creek, timed just to make the listener pause. Every house had its story. Every family has its secret. And on the night of September 12th, 1923, those stories collided. The morning had started like any other. Farmers tended to their fields. The local bakery's bell jingled as women carried bread home, and children gathered to listen to lessons at the small schoolhouse. But in the house of the Cartwright family, something felt different. Mr. Cartwright, a man known for his steady hand and calm demeanor, noticed it first. The absence of a familiar sound, the creak of a rocking chair that should have been there, the faint draft through a window that had been firmly closed the night before. He dismissed it, attributing it to an early chill in the mountain air. Meanwhile, young Abigail, his eldest daughter, wandered near the creek. She had been warned countless times to avoid the dense woods, yet curiosity, or perhaps instinct, drew her to the shadows of the trees. She noticed a figure standing across the water. It didn't move, didn't call out, just watched. For a heartbeat, she thought it might be a neighbor. Then, slowly, it stepped back into the mist. She ran home, without a word. By midday, small incidents had accumulated. The mailman reported seeing footprints in the mud where none should have been. A neighbor swore she had heard someone crying behind the abandoned Miller farmhouse. And in the schoolhouse, a teacher found a note on her desk, written in a child's hand. The creek watches. Do not tell, no one could explain it. The town, so familiar with routine, felt off. Each incident alone might have been dismissed, but together they created an uneasy rhythm, a quiet drumbeat warning that something was unfolding. As night approached, the temperature dropped sharply. Fog rolled down the valley, wrapping Pine Creek in a cold, thick blanket. Lanterns flickered in windows, their light struggling against the darkness. Shadows stretched unnaturally along walls, along fences, along the creek itself. People spoke less, moved cautiously, eyes scanning areas that once brought comfort. By 8 p.m., the first scream pierced the town. It came from the direction of the Cartwright home. Windows rattled, horses neighed, doors slammed. Yet when neighbors arrived, there was nothing. No visible intruder, no sign of struggle. Only a sense that the very air had changed. In the following hours, whispers spread. A neighbor claimed to see Abigail standing by the creek, though she had been missing since the afternoon. Others spoke of someone, or something, lurking in the fog, observing the town. Panic began to ripple beneath the surface of civility. Families barred doors, lit fires, and prayed. By midnight, the town was silent, but every creaking floorboard, every shifting tree limb, every distant splash seemed magnified. No one slept. Everyone listened. And somewhere, hidden by shadows, someone or something prepared to strike again. The town's streets, once familiar and comforting, now felt alien under the moonlight. Lanterns flickered in windows, casting shadows that stretched like long fingers across the dirt roads. Windows that normally offered warmth now appeared like dark, watching eyes. By the early hours of the morning, people began noticing things they could not explain. The wind seemed to carry voices, whispers barely audible, words that evaporated when you strained to hear. Dogs refused to enter yards, and cats disappeared for hours, only to return with hair matted and fur damp, looking at their owners with unreadable expressions. At the Cartwright home, Abigail could not sleep. She lay awake, staring at the faint moonlight that seeped through her curtains, listening. At first, it was just the creek, murmuring like it had always done. Then came the soft tapping, light, deliberate, almost rhythmic, against the wooden siding. Her breath caught. She told herself it was a branch, a falling leaf, anything natural. But the sound continued, moving, shifting. She felt it approach the window, then retreat, then approach again. Meanwhile, Mr. Cartwright patrolled the perimeter of his property. Each step on the cold, damp ground echoed unnaturally. His eyes scanned the fog that clung to the edges of the trees, trying to pierce the whiteness. A shadow moved, tall, human-shaped but fluid, like it was part of the mist itself. He froze. Then it vanished. Only the sound of the creek remained. News spread quickly. Neighbors who had once been skeptical now whispered about the watcher in the fog. People shared what they had seen, heard, or imagined. A farmer spoke of a figure standing in his cornfield, perfectly still, until he blinked, and it was gone. A child swore she had been followed along the road home, footsteps echoing hers, even though no one was behind her. By mid-morning, a search party formed. 10 men, armed with lanterns and whatever tools they could grab, moved cautiously into the thick woods surrounding Pine Creek. The fog clung to their shoulders, muffling footsteps and swallowing the paths behind them. Hours passed with nothing found, except more signs of movement. Footprints in the mud appeared where none should be. Twigs snapped, and the fog seemed to part just enough to reveal fleeting glimpses of a figure at the edge of vision. The men felt eyes upon them, though no human presence could be confirmed. The townsfolk began to realize something profound. These were no ordinary disturbances. Whatever was among them was deliberate, patient, and aware. Panic simmered beneath the surface, and yet the town clung to the fragile sense of order it had always known. By late afternoon, strange incidents reached the Cartwright home again. Abigail's younger brother, Thomas, found a small toy, one he had lost months ago, placed precisely on the doorstep. No footprints led to it. No one claimed to have found it. Voices became more persistent. Not loud, but close enough to feel someone breathing just beyond the threshold of hearing. Whispers seemed to call names, speak in half-formed sentences, and then vanish before they could be understood. Neighbors noticed the same pattern. Objects moved, doors slightly ajar when they had been locked, and animals behaving erratically. The sense of being watched became overwhelming. People stopped walking alone, stopped traveling at night. Yet the mystery only drew some closer, curiosity mingling with fear. By evening, a new visitor arrived in town. A drifter, unfamiliar with the creek, claimed he had seen a body lying near the water. The townsfolk, horrified, followed him, expecting a discovery of flesh and bone. When they reached the creek, there was nothing, only a series of footprints that led into the woods and ended abruptly. No sign of struggle, no trace of a body. Just the soft murmur of the creek, flowing calmly as though nothing had happened. Still, a few brave or reckless residents attempted to investigate the abandoned Miller farmhouse. Doors creaked open under their hands, and inside, dust floated in the fading sunlight like a thick haze. Furniture was overturned, but again, no explanation could be found. And in the corner, a single chair faced the wall, as if someone had been sitting there, waiting. As night approached, the fog thickened. Lantern light cut through only a few feet, and every shadow became a potential threat. The creek reflected the pale moon, distorted by the swirling mist. Figures moved where none should have been. The air grew heavier, making each breath a conscious effort. By midnight, the first real confrontation occurred. Abigail, drawn inexplicably back toward the creek, came upon a figure, shrouded in fog, unmoving. She called out, and the figure slowly turned. A face emerged from the mist, pale and expressionless. It did not speak. It did not move. And then, as if realizing she had seen it, the figure dissipated into the night. The town of Pine Creek had fallen into a strange rhythm, one dictated not by clocks or church bells, but by the whispers in the fog and the shadows that never quite vanished. People no longer moved freely. They traveled in pairs or small groups, lanterns held high, eyes darting to every flicker of movement along the edges of the forest. Abigail and her family barricaded their home more securely each night, but still, every sound, the scratching of branches against the siding, the distant clap of wood falling in the forest, or the muted echo of a voice calling her name, made hearts pound in ways that felt unnatural. Sleep came rarely and lightly, and when it did, it was filled with dreams she could not explain. Figures emerged from the mist, pale and silent, always observing, always patient. The town elders gathered secretly in the schoolhouse, voices low, shadows stretching across the wooden floor. They spoke of previous occurrences, strange disappearances, unexplained sounds, and unmarked graves hidden among the hills. But none of it had prepared them for the current fear. There was consensus, finally. Pine Creek would never feel the same again. Something had arrived, and it had claimed ownership over the nights. The drifter returned, whispering of movements he had seen, shapes in the fog that shifted as if the forest itself were alive. Children began reporting that whispers followed them home, and some refused to sleep in their beds, preferring the safety of a floor corner with their blankets pulled over their heads. Then came the first undeniable confrontation. Abigail, drawn again to the creek, saw it clearly for the first time. A figure, tall, indistinct in the fog, yet undeniably human-shaped, stood near the water. Its presence radiated something undefinable, an awareness that seemed to mirror her own fear. She stepped forward, heart pounding, mind racing with every story, every warning she had ever heard about Pine Creek. The figure remained still, watching her. And then, as though aware that she recognized it, it moved. Not toward her, but sideways, gliding through the fog, and disappeared among the trees, leaving only the soft ripple of water in its wake. Across town, others had similar encounters. Doors slammed shut on their own, footsteps echoed along hallways where no one walked, and lamps flickered with shadows that seemed too deliberate to be natural. It became clear something had anchored itself in the town, and every resident was a potential witness. Small animals behaved erratically, dogs barking at empty spaces, cats hissing at walls, and birds flying in tight, panicked formations over rooftops. Even the creek itself seemed restless, moving faster, sounding louder, as if responding to the presence that haunted its edges. Abigail's younger brother, Thomas, disappeared briefly, only to be found hours later, sitting silently by the edge of the creek, staring at the water with eyes unseeing. He refused to speak of what he had seen, and when questioned, simply whispered, "It watches. Always." By now, the town was caught between fear and exhaustion. Sleep became a ritual of dread rather than rest. Each morning brought stories of new disturbances. People whispered of the creek carrying voices that mimicked loved ones, calling them to step closer, to cross into the fog where no one returned. The schoolhouse remained locked, yet children reported faint scratching at the doors during the night. Windows that had once let in sunlight now seemed like cages, revealing glimpses of movement in the forest that vanished when approached. Abigail, once brave and curious, now trembled at the edge of her own home. She remembered her first sight of the figure by the creek, and how it had moved silently, watching, waiting, yet never revealing itself fully. Her family tried to comfort her, but each new whisper, each new shadow, renewed the fear. Even the drifter, a man who had seen much in his travels, refused to stay longer. "There's something here that does not belong to us," he said, "and it's patient." By the end of the first night of this new terror, Pine Creek had changed irreversibly. The town was still, but the calm was hollow, fragile, as if every shadow, every rustle of the fog, carried a warning. The events of 1923 would not be forgotten, and no one could leave untouched by them. As the years passed, Pine Creek slowly returned to its quiet rhythms, but the memory of that night never truly left. Locals speak in hushed tones of strange sounds in the woods, of shadows that seem too deliberate to be natural. Some say the town itself remembers what happened, carrying a warning in the rustling leaves and the wind through the trees. And maybe, just maybe, if you ever find yourself wandering near Pine Creek after dark, you'll understand why the townsfolk never speak of it aloud. Would you dare spend a night there? Could you face what lurks in the memory of that valley? If you're still here, listening, You're braver than most. Subscribe to Dark Room for more journeys into the stories the world tried to forget.